So Reggie Bush got his Heisman back, which I think is a great thing. I think it is 100% warranted. It was somewhat weird at the time that they even took it away, especially with the Heisman Trophy. Like the Heisman Trophy never took away O.J. Simpson's Heisman Trophy. All right, even after the armed robbery thing, they didn't take away his Heisman Trophy. The idea that somebody could be in federal prison and casting a ballot for like Jameis Winston is weird to me. But nonetheless, Reggie Bush got his Heisman back, and I think that's objectively, well, I guess probably subjectively, it's a good thing. I think it's a bad decision to take it away from him in the first place and give it back. I am one of the I'm the type of guy I hate the idea of, well, that's a slippery slope. First of all, slippery slopes are fun. Like skiing. You were just throwing a trash bag and some Dawn dish soap down a hill on like a hot summer day and go sliding down it. Slippery slopes are fun. They're supposed to be fun. The idea that that's a phrase is stupid to me. Slippery slopes and the question of, well, where does it end, should never be, in my opinion, used because it's a stupid thought process. Well, where does it stop? Somewhere. No matter what, it always stops somewhere. But I can't help but notice that, or think that, giving Reggie Bush his Heisman back opens up Pandora's box to so many different high-profile situations and cases in the long-running history of the NCAA. Now, I know and I understand that it's the Heisman Trophy Trust that is giving Reggie Bush back his trophy. It's not the NCAA. And that's an important distinction to make, because I don't think you're going to see the NCAA go back in time and go like, well, maybe we got this wrong, because so many people didn't even take the time to celebrate Reggie Bush getting his Heisman back today. It quickly turned into Ohio State should get their 2010 season back. And if you're gonna open that box of, you know what, we got that one wrong, there are a lot of, you know what, we got that one wrong. That's going back to, like, hey, the Fab Five at Michigan would technically be all right in today's NCAA. The Pony Excess, Eric Dickerson and Craig James and the dudes that got SMU put on the death penalty would be A-okay today. So what are the, how do you rectify that? Do you give SMU, you know what, SMU, hey, sorry, we screwed you out of 11 football games for 2 seasons. So every year for the next 22 years, you're going to get to play an extra, like, you're going to get your own Hawaii rule, and you're going to get to play. Of course, that's not going to happen. And I part of me is like a stickler for the rules. You know what? The rules were the rules. Reggie Bush broke the rules at the time, as preposterous as they might be. Those were the rules, and he knew the consequences for taking improper benefits and making himself technically ineligible, and he chose to do it anyway. Now I realize that that's like a hard ass stance to take, because the world isn't black and white. It's varying shades of gray, and you got to find where in that gray everything operates. At the flip side is if you go back and say, okay, times have changed, rules have changed, thought processes have changed. We look at things differently now than we did. And really, Reggie Bush didn't win his Heisman all that long ago, and I don't feel like I'm that old. Okay, like, I don't feel like I'm, well, back in my day, but you couldn't do the things that Reggie Bush did. Reggie Bush is guilty of, but he did them anyway. And there should be some consequence for that. Is being without your Heisman Trophy for 15 years punishment enough? I think so. I also don't know that I want, for the most part, the Heisman Trophy Trust deciding morality, ethics, etiquette, anything like that. It's the same thing that People somewhat grandstanded. Speaking of Jameis Winston earlier, when Jameis Winston had some run-ins during his Heisman Trophy season, people didn't vote for Jameis Winston because he didn't embody the character and the integrity of college football. Shut up. When Cam Newton won the Heisman Trophy, it doesn't take a science rocket to figure out, like, okay, it is somewhat verifiable proof that your dad asked Mississippi State for $180,000 for you to go to that college, and then you went to Auburn for free. Like, it doesn't take a whole lot to figure out that's probably not the case. And yet people at that time refused to vote for Cam Newton because of character issues and integrity and yada, yada, yada. I don't know that I want those entities. And I realize it's much more the NCAA's spot to somewhat regulate sportsmanship, integrity, character, etc., than it is I think if you're awarding an award outside of, and maybe this makes me a hypocrite for thinking, like, I don't think O.J. Simpson should have had his Heisman trophies taken away, by the way. It's just the idea that, like, if getting a couple of grand in an apartment for your mom nullifies your eligibility for the Heisman Trophy, I would think nearly decapitating your ex-wife and a waiter might kind of put you in the same spot. But I don't know that I want the Heisman Trophy trust thinking about anything other than on the field performance. And it's the same for NFL MVP. There was the entire dust up a few years ago with Hub Arkish, who said he wouldn't vote for Aaron Rodgers for NFL MVP because he didn't get vaccinated for COVID-19. I don't know that that should factor into the decision on whether or not somebody takes home an award or not. It should matter what happens between that 100 by 53 and a third field should be what decides it. And I don't know that taking away somebody's Heisman Trophy and then giving it back to him 20 years after the fact is just a good spot to be in. But at the same time, should there be repercussions for kind of deliberately breaking the rules, even if you don't think the rules are appropriate or adequate? Or I just don't know that you come back later in time and say, like, you know what, we got that one wrong, because the entire time we were operating under the guise that amateurism was really important and separated college sports from every other sport. Like, amateurism has always been and always will be stupid. We live in a capitalist society where, like, the entire idea, some people's minds, that you exist is to make more money. And then the fact that we were going to limit people who were legal adults from making money, it just doesn't ever track. And the fact that it took 20 years after the fact to come to that realization and be like, oh, wait, you know what? And I think, one, the Heisman Trophy should be commended for the decision to give Reggie Bush back his Heisman Trophy. Because I imagine in the kind of probably snooty, stuck-up society that makes up the Heisman Trophy Trust, it probably wasn't a really super popular decision from the get-go. Of, like, the first person who said, like, hey, we should give Reggie Bush his Heisman Trophy back probably wasn't viewed real favorably. But after a bit of time, it's gotten to that point where the majority, I think I would say the overwhelming majority of not just people, but college football fans would tell you Reggie Bush deserves to have his Heisman back. So I commend them for coming to that decision, because we live in a day and age where once somebody makes a decision, damn it, that is the only decision that could possibly have ever been made. And I will double down and triple down until the day I die, because that's the decision I made. I'm not really open to other viewpoints or accepting new information to change your thoughts. It's generally I made that decision, I'm going to stay firm in that decision until the end of time. So I think the Heisman Trophy Trust deserves some credit for coming around to giving Reggie Bush back his Heisman Trophy. But it's undeniable that it opens up Pandora's box. Now, you can argue it doesn't open up Pandora's box because it's the NCAA that hasn't opened that box yet. But the second that an established entity like the Heisman Trophy is willing to say, hey, we got this wrong, and now we're going to rectify it, leads to people then questioning, well, wait a second, if they can admit that they were wrong and they're reversing course, why can't you? So, for instance, it's a similar thing that Major League Baseball a couple of days ago went back and reversed a scoring decision, and that brought people up to say, well, why didn't you go back and change Armando Galarraga's perfect game that wasn't a perfect game when everybody saw that it was a perfect game due to extreme umpire malfeasance? And it continues to be somewhat of a talking point of like, well, once you open that box, which is generally why people don't open the box, which is why people don't go back. And I think we should live in a world and in a society where if you screwed one up, you say, hey, I got that one wrong. But the reason people don't is because when you do, it opens that box. It starts that slippery slope of, well, where does it stop? And so I don't know how much farther this goes, but the second Reggie Bush gets his Heisman Trophy back, Terrell Pryor is on Twitter saying, I should get my records back from Ohio State. The 2010 season should be reinstated. You have fans saying the 2012 Ohio State undefeated team that had a bowl ban, it should now be declared the national champion. It starts that slippery slope. It opens that box, and it asks the question, where does it end? And I don't like to be in a spot where it's a slippery slope, Pandora's box, where does it end? Because I don't think asking the question should be like the definitive. I don't think that asking the question should be where things end, right? Like we should want to get to an answer. When you ask a question, I have no respect for people. Oh, I'm just asking the question. No, you're not. You're being a douchebag because the question shouldn't be the end result. The question shouldn't be the destination. The answer and the truth or whatever should be the end result. So what is the end result? What is the answer? I don't have that answer. And that leads to, and believe it's not, I'm not egotistical enough to be like, well, because I don't have the answer, therefore, I think Reggie Bush should never have had his Heisman Trophy taken away. He should have gotten it back the second it was ripped away from him. But when an entity like the Heisman Trophy says, we're going to rewrite our wrong, it leads to other questions. But I don't think you're ever going to see the NCAA admit that they were wrong or admit like, hey, we screwed this one up, because it leads to so many more questions, because it leads to, where does it stop? Where does the NCAA say, you know what? We told SMU like 5 or 6 times, stop it, and they didn't. So they had it coming. But in 2024 NCAA, what SMU was doing wasn't an issue. The Fab Five in Michigan, what they were doing wasn't wrong in today's NCAA. But I don't think you're ever going to see them open up that box, because where does it end? I don't know the answer to that question. And I don't know that they do either. And I think if you're going to go back and try to rewrite every wrong that you've ever had, it's just kind of a fool's errand. And I don't know where you go from here. But I appreciate Reggie Bush getting his Heisman Trophy back, because I think that's the right thing to do. And I appreciate, especially today's day and age, when somebody can say, I got that one wrong, big guy, and I'm sorry about that. So here you go. Here's your vote back. Here's your trophy back. Here's your recognition that we kind of kept from you for a long time. And it creates this scenario where everybody knows that you won the Heisman Trophy. Like, we watched you be one of the most electrifying college football players of all time. But at the same time, does it absolve him from breaking the rules? A little bit. So it's not a black and white. It's a gray, like most everything else is. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you get all the great college football content that's coming out of Saturday Glory. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle here on